10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What's up, all of our boggies out there? Welcome to episode 28 of Your Brain on God. We have a very special guest with us, Tracy Brown. She is an author and an amazing artist and a teacher and also a mama, and she's incredible. We're so grateful to have, and she is passionate about living whole and teaching others how to step into living a lifestyle of wholeness. And so we're excited to gather all the wisdom we can from her. Yeah, and this is part one of our interview with Tracy Brown. Enjoy. Here we are, all of our boggies out there. It is episode 28 of Your Brain on God. Wow.
Nobody told me I was supposed to do that.
No, you didn't have to do that. We've got a very special guest on this episode 28. Isn't that amazing? I was thinking about it before. This is a stupid thought, but 2 plus 8, every number... I'm not even going to say it. It wasn't going to make sense. Equals 30 when you go up in 20. No, it doesn't.
What? What are you talking about?
I was thinking of 2 plus 8, 28, and that equals 10. But I was like, every number in the 20s equals 30. That doesn't make sense because 21 equals 3.
I'm not being set up for success here.
Anyway,
right now.
this is not.
Oh my gosh.
Now I'm going to be thinking about how every number in the 20s equals 30.
Anyway, welcome to our episode 28 of Your Brain on God. We've got a very special guest with us. Her name is Tracy Brown.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Tracy Brown.
Tracy Brown, and she is incredible. She is so full of wisdom, and we wanted to have her on the episode this week to talk about living whole, to talk about emotional health. I know that we talk a lot about emotional health and being healthy, but she's like somewhat of a guru, I would say.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can I put that on my resume?
You could put that on your resume. I mean, if you want.
Guru.
Guru, yeah.
Like no explanation.
Job experience, guru. Yeah, from the time you were born to present.
Yeah.
I've always been a guru. It's
Pretty
been my
much.
call.
I'm in formation. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about living whole with Tracy, and really we're just going to allow it to be all about you today, Tracy. All about your thoughts about things, because I'm pretty sure that people are tired of hearing about us.
They hear us all the time.
They hear what we think about things all the time, you know? And we just think that you have the truth, you know?
Don't put that kind of pressure
We are seeking the truth, and we have found the holder.
I'm an Enneagram 2. I don't want to be out in front, but I will do my best.
Do your best.
Yeah, thank you.
You're going to do great. Yeah.
Here we go.
If you came looking for the truth, Tracy has it.
It's true because I have Jesus, and
Yes.
I do have
Oh,
a
come
Bible
on.
app on my phone. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Nice.
I have truth.
And if you
in
have a
my
Bible
pocket.
app on your phone, you're pretty much set.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You got the truth in your pocket.
Can we end the podcast now?
Whoa.
But
You
it is
wanna
in
live
your
whole.
heart. That's the question. Is it in your heart? Sorry.
Right.
Yes.
The Bible is in your pocket, but is it in your heart?
Oh. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it
That's
is.
really the question.
Okay, so Tracy.
Yes.
Well, tell us a little bit about you. So who is Tracy?
Yeah.
Well, so I grew up Catholic. I love to start there because most people have like an immediate visceral reaction to that phrase. Like, I was raised Catholic, and you either get like, and they like already know a lot about you, or you get people who are like, oh, me too. And they know a lot about you. So it's kind of like a nice empathy point. But that means like from a very young age, I knew the Lord. I had a lot of religious formation in my life. I understood that there was like tradition and history and whatnot, but I grew up that way, and I had these like incredible encounters with Jesus and Holy Spirit, but I didn't have language for those things. I grew up prophetic, I guess, but now didn't know that language either.
Prophetic?
Prophetic? Yeah.
You grew up prophetic?
I knew, like, I would hear from the Lord, you know what I mean? But I didn't have language for it. I didn't really have a framework for how to understand that was a thing. Because when you're growing up in a religious framework like Catholicism, which I still have great respect and honor for, But there is sort of an intermediary for you, right? Like a priest who does a lot of the like talking to God for you.
Right.
And so what all of that means is that I grew up feeling really weird because I didn't have a lot of framework for how I was experiencing the world, the Lord, myself. And then in 2016, I went through this like just horrific year of like loss. I like to call it like the great forest fire of my life. Like everything burned down. And then I found a church where I felt like I really needed to be in connection with people, and a church that was full of like vitality and life. And that's where we met, right? Center Point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, so were you actively involved in the Catholic Church up until 2016?
Yeah, I would have called myself a practicing Catholic. I wasn't like actively attending for maybe a couple of years right before 2016. I had kiddos. They were really young. It was just kind of hard to get to church, but I still would have considered myself a practicing Catholic at that point in my life. And then came to Center Point, and that sort of launched me into like what I would call the second half of life. Most people hit it at 40. I hit it at 33. And just
the year of the Lord.
Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, so now I get to walk out of a new place of like confidence in my identity. I have language and framework for my my relationship, and I'm someone now who is passionate about seeing people find language, frameworks, experiences, activations around some of the same things that helped me come to grips with who I am, start to begin to seek after who God really is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And, well, I don't know, Aaron, did you have any questions before?
No, go.
So what is we know that you're very passionate about holistic living, like what you were just mentioning, people being whole and being able to see God and come to a fullness, and what was the catalyst that kind of started that? I think usually whenever someone's passionate about something, there's often a moment or something that happens that is a catalyst to make them pursue whatever that is.
Right.
Was it the forest fire?
It was. So 2016 was, I lost my dad to cancer. My mom had a really hard time with that and was really, really depressed. My daughter broke her leg and then through that process was diagnosed with a genetic disorder. I found out my marriage ended. And in the process of my marriage ending, we were going to have a third baby, and I had a miscarriage. This is all in the course of like 5 months.
Jeez.
So it was just like every kind of grief and loss I felt like I could experience, right? And I got to this place where I was just like, I have been stripped of every piece of me that I felt like I built.
Wow.
Because I was the kid who was like, I got straight A's in school, and I went to college, and I had a master's, and I built a family, and I had a career, and all of those things just like, that's my fire sound effect. And it just brought me to this place of realizing that I didn't look anything like Jesus, in my own strength, in my own framework. I didn't look anything like the person that I loved and wanted to follow after. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
And I also knew that if I wanted to contribute anything to the world after that series of losses, I was going to have to do a lot of healing. And I had 2 young kids. I wanted to be a good mother, I wanted to be somebody who could recognize and move past and out of strongholds and generational things. And so it was really just a forced moment of like, are you going to stay down or are you going to get up?
Right.
And if you're going to get up, whose strength are you going to do it in? And as I just started to kind of like push myself up off the ground a tiny bit, I realized God started talking to me about like evangelizing in the context of how I was perceived. And by that I mean, I, growing up Catholic, I would always say, like, I'm not an evangelist. I'm not going to go talk to people and be like, hey, do you know Jesus? Do you have a personal relationship with your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? It wasn't my thing.
Go around and give tracts.
Yeah, and I actually, like, much to my shame now, but although we don't like shame, I did kind of like make jokes about those kinds of people because I was so uncomfortable with it. You know, I was like, the only way I could contextualize that and keep it out here was to be like, you're so cool with your evangelism. I'm not that thing.
Right.
And the Lord was like, actually, you really are, and you can be, because you are going to start looking more and more like Jesus, like the love of like your heavenly Father gets to shine out through you. So you don't have to have conversations with people. You just get to walk into a space carrying the presence and the knowledge that you are a beloved child. And people are going to wonder about that, right? And even if it's just planting a seed, and then someday later they meet an Aaron Russ or an Aaron Brown or a Daryl Daniels who gets to have that conversation. I got to be a part of that process.
Right.
So I'm passionate about it because to me, it feels like, I wish I had known so many of these things, before I got to the forest fire, because maybe I would have walked through that even.
And were you not like actively pursuing these types of things? Like you got your master's and stuff like that. What was your master's in?
My master's was in English, and so I have 2 master's degrees, one in English and one in creative writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was English, creative writing.
Yeah.
And had you had any like experience with like emotional health or like coming into kind of practices of meditation or awareness or any of those things before this hit? Or was that like the dive into like, I need to grab onto something, you know what I mean? Like I need, with the Lord, like I need tools to help. Was that the case, or were you already in some of that stuff?
That's a great question. No, I think that there's a lot in Catholicism that lends itself to sort of a meditative, contemplative life.
Yeah.
I mean, my family and I, during Lent and Easter season, like for a long time, even in high school, we would sit. This is kind of like vulnerable because not everybody listening understands Catholicism, but we would sit and we would pray a rosary every night together, which is really a contemplative time of just like sitting and soaking with the Lord, facilitated through repetitive prayer. So if you had asked me then, like, was I learning contemplative, like wholeness, I would have been like, what? But now looking back, I understand how God was priming me to understand, like, sometimes you just have to sit in God's presence. And now sometimes my rosary prayer is just like, help. Yeah. Help. Like, God help, Yeah. And it's really powerful. But, and then I actually studied psychology for a while before I became an English major. But once I got to the math and the statistics, I was like, I'm out. We're about to go look at words.
Give me words instead of numbers.
Was there, obviously creative writing, that takes a lot, like a different part of your brain. Was there like always like a fascination with the brain or how you think or stuff like that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have always been fascinated by people. I'm a really relational person. I my whole life I have loved to understand people. I love to be in deep connection with people, even to the point where I often take on like people's like phrases or mannerisms. I was really, really close with Christina. You guys know Christina. And for a while, people were like, you sound just like her. It's really weird. And because I just am learning people and I'm I function in empathy really, really deeply. And so I love to just get into like what people are experiencing and understand and meet them there. And in creative writing, that's a big part of it too, right? You're creating characters and you have to think about, okay, why would this person do this thing? Does this make sense for this character? How does this advance a plot realistically, right?
Or even how a character, how a character develops and grows and even like overcomes adversity.
Oh, yeah.
That's like a huge thing that you're actually like creating for another person,
Yeah.
And then like we kind of, in emotional get to do that for ourselves, you know what I mean?
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
like in creative writing you kind of get separate from it because you get to create characters, but a lot of authors put themselves into characters or struggles that they have, right?
Yeah. It's a really interesting thing to say too, because I can't even tell you how frustrating it is to get a character to a point and then realize they're going to do something totally different than what you had planned for them to do. And you're just like, that but I really wanted you to open this door. And then, but you realize the character you've written is going to like get in the car instead of open this door. And in a way it helps you then go develop patience. Does that make sense? And flexibility, even with yourself. You can have more compassion with yourself. I don't know about you guys, but I find myself often going like, oh, I thought if I got to this place, I would open this door. Right. But I feel like now I'm going to get in the car. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
we often, I've noticed that in me too. Like, and often I guess the goals of myself can be like formulated in some sort of like brokenness of what I have to like accomplish or whatever. So it's like, if I get free, then like I'll be perfect or something like that. And then really like when I'm free, I don't even care about that. You know what I mean? Like I totally almost like, I surprise myself in what I actually will choose in actually getting more healthy, or actually seeing myself, you know, like you have this door that you want to go through, and then you actually do the formational work, or you have like a heart change or whatever, and then you see that door, you're like, I don't even want that door anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a whole like encounter with the Lord where he walked me through 2 sets of doors 3 different times. Oh, I wish I had pulled up the thing I wrote about it, but because I can't remember what they all were, but it was like, you know, do you want empathy or do you want like power? And I was like, well, empathy is powerful. I had all these like wrestling moments, right? And then so it was like a choose your own adventure moment with the Lord, where I was like, that's awesome. And you get to that moment and you surprise yourself, right? Because if you asked me that, I would, you know, just sitting at coffee, I'd be like, oh, I'd choose empathy. But when I really got there, I was like, I do want to be powerful. And then you realize things about yourself, right? Like, oh, that still needs like healing. That still needs like, what's behind that desire for power? Where do I feel powerless and helpless? And
Right.
Anyway.
You know, I had a conversation with a friend, and he was like super about like singing. You know, like he wanted to be in front of people, like on the worship team and stuff like that. And we just had a conversation, and I started to dig a little bit deeper. I'm like, what do you love about singing? You know, and you know, he was like saying some like generic statements. He's like leading the people worship and that kind of stuff. And you know, I was like, what about your voice? Like you speaking, what does that like mean to you? Like, do you feel like you have power in your voice, you know? And anyway, long story short, we got to like this dissection of why he loved to lead worship. It's because it was the place that he had power, right? Where his words could actually move and minister and change things and affect things, because in his everyday life, he felt like his words were kind of looked over or not heard, or he didn't know how to use like worship. Leading on a stage, like leading guitar and singing or whatever, was a place where he felt powerful, right? And so it was like this idea that he wanted, you know what I mean, to lead people in worship. And then it was like, I really want power. Or I feel powerless in this area. And that wasn't the sum of who he is or something like that, but it was a recognition of, man, I'm using this gift, and in a way, like this is an amplification of my voice. You can't not hear me if I'm on the mic, right? And so it makes me feel like I have some sort of control over people listening and hearing me. And it was like this really powerful moment that we had together. And it was like, he was like, oh, I didn't realize.
That's incredible, because that's a huge part of like, as you walk out of formation and emotional health and healing and spiritual, all the things, right? You become somebody who can ask powerful questions. And you can let people then walk a journey through that question. And the benefit then for them or yourself, like I have to ask myself powerful questions all the time. Some days I'm like, I just don't have the energy for it, but I try. And that helps you then put practical, real, tangible things behind some of the language we use that gets really muddy. Like, for example, I'm listening to you talk about this young man, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so that's really good for him, because then he can learn to, he's aware of that power, that desire, right? Which isn't necessarily bad, but he needs to have the capacity to surrender it, right? To Jesus, and operate out of a place of humility, and then the power comes out of that. But when you just tell people like surrender, right? Surrender is the answer. Then everybody's like, okay, I surrender. But then when you're like, when you walk them through a process with great questions of like, okay, what am I actually surrendering? Okay, I'm saying I really want to be powerful. I really want my voice to be heard, but
Right.
I'm going to actively lay down that like driving desire for the sake of God's presence and his goodness and his plan. Is that right?
Why do you think we stay so general? You know what I mean? Because I think that is a big thing, you know, in the church either, or even just in life. We kind of put blanket statements over like, just do this. And it's like, it's going to heal. Like, why do you think we fail to actually get specific with, I'm surrendering power, or I'm surrendering this? What keeps us from that, you think?
Oh, I think a lot of it is just, so when you have generations of people who haven't been given language and tools, that's the best they have, right? So it's not an intentional shortcoming. It's just people doing what they can with what they have. And when you've put language like, let it go, right? Like you see that all over Instagram right now.
Right.
Right. Like, just let it go. One of the big things, let it go. And I want to like punch a wall or something every time I see it, because I'm like, you're not giving people any tools for that directive, right? And then they get into this like cycle of, okay, I let it go. But then you still feel it. And you still wrestle with it. Okay, I clearly didn't let it go. Well, how do I let it go? What do I do? Okay, I let it go. You know, and then it just becomes this like I think of how, you know, monks used to like whip themselves, right? We can get into that mentally when we haven't been given a real path to walk around those things.
Yeah. What has been your experience with that journey? Because I mean, if we haven't been passed down those tools, we have to kind of figure out, how do we find those tools? How do we learn how to do this? What's been that journey for you for discovering how to navigate those moments?
Right. So for me, it's connecting two pieces that I think are really, really important. And I think that's a big part of the problem, is we don't have a holistic view even of ourselves, of processes. I had to go, okay, let me get into the language. I love language, right? So whether that means I'm going to read scripture in like 5 different translations, and then I'm going to go do a word study on surrender in this context, and I'm going to really figure the heck out what Jesus means when he says this thing, right? And then you have to build a process to embody that thing. It is not, okay, so one of the things that I think is really important is your brain is not just here. Your whole body is your brain. Your nervous system, all your nerves, your spine, everything is always talking to each other. It's a system, right?
Yeah.
So that helps me then go, okay, when I'm thinking about my mind, my brain, this is my brain too. Like if I'm throwing a ball, my brain is engaged in that, right? If I'm having tactile feedback here, or I'm feeding myself something, literally, sometimes it's like I have to eat root vegetables. It sounds so weird, but that's a grounding practice for me. Like I need something that has that like physical experience of being grounded. Does that make sense? Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to get off topic, but
that's like not Eastern, but Jewish also, like the belly, even like being a center of self. It's like Jesus, like rivers of living water flow from your belly. You know what I mean? From your stomach. Like there was this idea of the fullness or the wholeness of a being.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And when you compartmentalize it here, even though that simplifies it and it makes it easy to digest and talk about, the practical reality is much more embodied. Yeah. So surrender has to become an embodied process.
And not just something you do in your brain.
Right. You can't just go, okay, I lay it down.
Right.
I let it go. You literally have to, because your body doesn't speak English. You know?
Right.
Like, and so your body's like, I don't know, I'm still holding it. Like, I don't know how to put it down. And I was just talking to someone the other day, and she was like, how do I step into rest? How do I step out of survival mode? That's an embodied process. And for a lot of people, it looks like play. Like play will pull you out of survival mode. Because when you're fighting for survival, you don't have the luxury of play. Rest will do it too, but we really struggle with that. Both of those things are hard.
Let's provide some context too, because you said some words, play, rest, and I think you said some things before. Yeah. First, when you talked about a whole being whole, a whole being, can you you kind of talked about that a little bit right now with the body.
Yeah.
But can you kind of expound on that? Like, what does it mean to live whole?
Yeah. Okay. So, and you brought up like Hebrew, like the Hebrew idea of wholeness, and that's really where I've gotten to is this. They talk about the nefesh, and it's a word that's used for soul, but used for throat,
which is actually, I think it's so awesome how closely related they are, because everything that you take inside of you goes through your throat.
Right.
Whatever you put in, whatever comes out, it's coming through your throat. When you're speaking, you're breathing, it's coming through right here. And if you don't have your throat, you don't have your life.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most vulnerable pieces of our body.
Yeah.
Like you can tell through body language if someone's feeling really uncomfortable or threatened, they'll like cover their throat a lot of times. They'll like touch themselves up here in some way. So that's another beautiful thing to realize, though, right? That God says the most powerful, important part of us is also the most vulnerable.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And it is exposed in some ways, right? And when like your brain is encased in like bone, right? Like this bad boy is safe unless I'm on a motorcycle. But like this is delicate and vulnerable and soft and but also powerful and vital to life. So wholeness is kind of this formation of going, okay, what does it look like to carry the tension of strength and vulnerability? What does it look like to acknowledge that I'm more than just a process in my brain? I am an embodied spirit, right? I have a soul, I have a spirit, I have a body, I have a mind, and all of those things are together, interconnected, right? And so they all have to speak to each other. And so that is one of the things I have experienced as being like a real roadblock for people is they aren't like led through a process where you move out of just your brain into your body, or you move out of a spiritual practice into your mind and your heart and your physical life.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It needs to be done. Like there's so many different, like moving from it into your body, you know what I mean? Actually experiencing life in your body. And then there are moments where it's like, I want to experience life through the mind, or through the imagination, or through my thoughts, you know. And we often, I think that compartmentalization is super damaging, and even polarizing for people. You have like the logical people,
right,
and then you have like the emotionally driven people, right? And it's like, I don't think we were ever created to just be a logical person.
No.
You know what I mean? To toss off all emotions, or to just be an emotional person, right? Or to just follow the senses of our body, you know?
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
they're meant to work in sync with each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was just learning last night about like the synchronization all throughout our body, that even things like called pacemaker cells are like sending electrical charges at just the right moment to like hit like other electrical charges to make sure that your heart's beating in the right synchronicity.
Yeah.
Like, and they have to be like almost like perfectly, but not actually too synced up. It's like actually like a weird thing, because if they're actually over synced up, it'll like actually destroy you. But it's like I was blown away, right? But we often, like, I think for me, make an enemy within myself when I don't realize that I'm a whole being.
Yes.
You know, because it's what I've done is my mind is jacking me up right now.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I blame my mind. And while you were talking about that, I literally almost started crying because I felt like the mind was like the bully who's misunderstood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like he doesn't know how else to like operate, and so everyone like leaves him alone, and he gets punished for all these things that he's doing, but like he's really just trying to protect like you know, or she, whatever you want, if you're mind to be male or female, or, but almost like this kid who's like, you know, trying to affect things, but we separate the mind, you know what I mean? Or we don't think that that's actually a part of my body. Like, you're my friend, Mr. Mind, you know, and you're a part of the body with play, with my soul, with my belly, with my throat, you know, like you're a part of all of that. Like we're an interconnected being, and all of those things play into being healthy, you know. I mean, it's not just getting more intellectual, it's not just, you know, playing all the time, it's not just like experiencing emotions and sitting in them for hours upon end, right? It's all of these things together, which makes it more difficult as well, because it feels like if I can just know the one thing, you know,
There is no one thing.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
But the one thing is the vastness of who you are,
Yes.
and then I believe we're made in the image of God, so we're kind of like unsearchable in that way. Like if He's unsearchable, like what's inside of us is a lot bigger than we think it is. You know,
Absolutely.
so there's a lot to sift through.
There is.
Which might also keep us from getting specific as well, because getting specific is like extremely difficult, because it's like, I'm a big person, and there's a lot to search in here.
And there's the reality of like fatigue, weariness in your process, right? And so that's why it's really important to have introspective time and extroverted time and rest and play and worship, and right, you have to build, like you did this, and for me that's a picture of formation. Like we're not just formed once in the image of God, we're kind of like perpetually formed into the image of God. And my job then is to stay soft and malleable, right? And not have a hard heart and all of those things. And when I feel myself starting to get tired, okay, so do you guys get grumpy when you get tired?
Sometimes.
I do. When I'm tired, I'm like super grumpy. And I'm like, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to sleep. So that's my cue then to go, okay, so I'm probably going to have that mindset with the Lord. So I need rest, right? Anyway, but the point is, you need to give yourself permission to have a full formation process. And I use the link, you said friend. My mind is a friend. You went like this, which I love. I use the word ally. That was really helpful for me. And most people are going to have one of three places where they need to make an ally of an enemy in themselves. And for me, that is either your mind, your body, or your heart. For me, it was my body, which is why I have a bent towards talking about embodiment. I also think that in Christian culture, there's like language about the flesh and stuff that makes it hard to talk about embodiment. So it's a big one for me, but depending on your experience, right, you may say, okay, my mind is jacking me up. This is the enemy. How do you then come into an alliance and make this thing an ally? And a friend is okay too, but and if that's the language that gets you where you need to go, then use it. For me, it was like, I needed to know that I didn't always have to agree, but we were on mission together. Does that make sense? Like I didn't always have to be driven by my body, but we were on mission together. We're after the same thing,
right?
And then to walk that back, then I had to go, okay, why has this been an enemy? Like even in my college years, I had an eating disorder. That was my way to like control this thing that I couldn't understand or and I just wanted to subdue it, right? Like I just wanted it to be under my control. I was in charge of my physical self. And so then walking back and going, okay, why is that the case? Why do I feel that way? Well, I didn't have like a framework or a concept of how I was experiencing the world through a prophetic gift in my physical self. So I'm a feeler. I don't know if this is language like your listeners are familiar with, but
you could explain it a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead and explain as you go.
So we talk about prophetic gifts, and there's different like ways you may experience God's presence, God's heart, environments. Some people feel things, you know, in their physical selves. Some people know things, like you just have an impression. So there's just different tools that God uses, and they aren't always the same through your whole life. Does that feel like a simplified version enough to just move forward?
Yeah, I think so. About you're talking about whenever we hear from God, like
how you perceive
God's voice in their life.
Right. So growing up, I didn't know this, but I was experiencing God's heart for things through my physical self. I'd walk into places and I would feel an atmosphere, and then or I would feel what someone else was feeling, and then I needed tools to go, okay, what does God want to do in that thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then because I'm confused about these signals I'm receiving, right? That creates fear, mistrust, and then I want to just control this thing. Right?
That makes sense.
So some people have that experience with their mind. Some people have that experience with their heart. And it's then it's like, okay, I'm going to shut this thing down. Wherever it is, the response is usually I'm gonna subdue that. I'm gonna shut it down and be in charge of it.
So you mentioned the mind, the heart, and the body, three places that people would make enemies with himself when those one of those areas. So what I'm thinking is, okay, so how do you recognize which one it is? Or like, what does it look like for the mind to be an enemy, for the heart to be an enemy, body to be an enemy? You kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
But how do you recognize which one it is? And then do you have any practical or like ways that you would say address it like this?
Yeah. I think that you start by going, okay, if I were to be defined by someone as emotional, how would I feel about that, right? If your response is like, nope, I am not. If you take pride in like the logical side of you, right? Or you feel like this push against a label of an emotional person, you may struggle with your heart, right? If you feel so for you're aware that is this just a conversation you have with yourself where you're like, this thing is the mess?
Well, actually, my girlfriend pointed it out, like, because I was like, every time I talk about, me struggling with something, I'm like, yeah, my mind was just doing this, and my mind, she's like, why do you keep saying your mind? Like, what do you mean? And it's just the way to describe, like, the thoughts in my head that are like eating my lunch, that are like, are bullying me, or I kind of shove kind of like the ego, or just like struggles, or like condemnation, or just not present thoughts,
right,
with the mind. And so that has been, because for me, I've always like felt like been comfortable to feel, but my mind has always contradicted what kind of like my heart knows,
right?
Yeah. And so I've made an enemy with my mind because it's so annoying. Because I'm like, just think what I want you to think. Like it almost feels like I've felt powerless in it.
Yeah.
And so I've had to most often, like, the thoughts that are in my head have scared me. I want to stay away from the thoughts, and so I want to shut them down, and that leads into like escapism.
Yeah.
So any way that I can just shut this thing down so that I can just enjoy feeling what I feel.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's so that's what's become an enemy most for me, is the mind.
So there's a couple of practical tools in what he was talking about, which is you can get into connection with someone you really trust, and you can kind of have a conversation, right? Like, and say like, I'm trying to figure this piece of me out, but you have to really trust them, because it's a vulnerable conversation, right? To say, do you see me as having a piece of me that I push away? Like, you're essentially having the blind spot conversation, right? Like,
right.
And but an easier, maybe not easier, but one way to start that with yourself might be to just connect with those places. Like, literally just sit quietly and slow down for a second. Okay, get into your body. And how do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about being in your body? And then connect to your heart. How do you feel about being connected to your heart? How do you feel about the emotions that come up if you sit quietly for a minute? Or connect with your mind. What do you feel about, like, what are the things that come up when you just let your thoughts surface? Does that make sense? And in at least one of those places, you're probably going to have a like feeling.
Right.
And or some version of that, right? Where you're just like, this thing is what's holding me back. I want that under control, and if I could just like take it out of me, I would, right? And not everybody's going to have that strong of a reaction, but I do think most people have at least one place in them where they go, there's discomfort when I have to sit in that place.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to follow, like, wholeness and healing a lot of times is about following and leaning into discomfort, even pain sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Leaning into the part that seems like it's broken.
Yeah.
The part that we kind of want to neglect, and
yeah.
maybe we can sweep that under the rug, or maybe we can keep that one in the closet and kind of not address it.
Yeah.
But it's the whole time, it's like, that's the thing we need to actually deal with.
Oh yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I talk about it like I used to have this dog named Charlie, and he was just the worst dog on the planet. And he would bark at everybody. He bit people. He would run in circles incessantly. Like, people would be like, when are you going to give that dog away? I'm like, to who? Like, who wants this dog, right? So it got to the point.
Enemy.
Poor Charlie.
Yeah, he was terrible.
He became the scapegoat of the family.
Really, he was awful.
Everything was Charlie.
Like,
every problem.
But that's why he's the perfect analogy. Like,
Right.
he was epileptic. He was like, it was just so crazy. He would just, yeah. And so it got to the point where we couldn't have him out when people were around. We would literally have to like put him in a kennel, put him upstairs, like tucked back in the closet, because he would just bark the whole time. And I started to go, oh, I have a Charlie in me that I'm like, people come around and I'm like, put that in the kennel, put it in the closet. But I still know it's like back there barking. You know what I mean?
Right.
But everybody else around me might be like, oh, she's great.
Right.
Meanwhile,
right.
it's like back here. And so, yeah, you have to bring Charlie out and go, man, I'm really uncomfortable with you. And all of this comes back to one of the key things that I'm still very much working on, which is slowing down. And that's another reason why we simplify and we don't get specific and all of those things that we kind of were talking about before.
Right, because we can't slow down.
Yeah, you have to slow down quite a bit to, you know, you got to clear stuff off the top. I mean, my friend Sue, she's a brilliant like life coach and healing guru, and she has taught me these forgiveness statements, and she does tapping. So on your hand, she'll do like, if you need to forgive somebody else, you use this finger. If you need to forgive yourself, you use this finger. If you need to use forgive, or God forgives me, it's this one, right? So we do those, and it actually helps, even if it's just to keep me embodied. It helps me, and then I get to go.
Keeps you connected with yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I get to walk through. Like, that's the first thing I do now. A lot of times is like, okay, I forgive this person for, and I try to get specific, right? Like, for the way that they spoke to me that felt dishonoring. I forgive this person, and I forgive myself for misunderstanding, you know, those things.
Yeah.
But that's a slow process.
Right.
You can't just go, I feel this, therefore I will do this, and then that will be done.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. Is that,
Yeah, no, that's helpful. That's brilliant. Thank you.
yeah.
I think that's super crucial, because we're moving so quickly throughout life. I think one of my favorite things is people, and also something that keeps me from even slowing down. You know what I mean? Like, I love being around people all the time, and they're amazing, and it can like distract me, and I'm like, hang on, it's awesome, you know?
Yeah.
But it also keeps me from actually taking that space. Or it's very difficult, because I can have Charlie in the back of my head the entire conversation with somebody. Yeah. Something's barking at me. Yeah. And I'm like, just paying attention and trying to stay present, and I'm like, you're freaking barking in the back, and I can
hear Charlie barking?
Yeah. Dude, can you see that Charlie is barking? Do you know that I can feel it right now? Yeah. So
and the funny thing about being in connection with people is, it makes me think of Ben, do you guys know Ben Rector, the artist? He's a musician.
He sings that song like, brand new, whatever.
So he has this like he's one of my favorites. He has this little clip that comes up on Spotify sometimes, and it's just him talking to the audience, and he starts a song. They don't have percussion in the song, and the audience starts clapping, and he's like, hang on. Okay, so a general rule is you can't clap if there's no percussion, because you mean well, but you guys are going to get excited, and you're going to start clapping faster and faster and faster and faster. And then I'm going to have to start playing faster and faster and faster and faster. And by the end of the song, we're like, da 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 da. And that's what happens a lot of time when we get into connection with people, if we don't have a rhythm in the background of our lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because then we get excited, and then they get excited. I do this all the time. I'm like, then we should go to Africa on a mission. Then we should do this thing. And also, like, you know, with my friends who are equally excitable. And suddenly you're all moving at like a breakneck pace. But if I have like the drumbeat of heaven built into my life, we can clap all we want then, because we have a pace behind us. Right. And it helps me then go, does that fit into this pace that the Lord is setting?
I was watching this thing. Hopefully this ties in. But I was watching this thing about this bridge that they made. Where did they make it? Anyway, I can't remember where they make it. Oh my gosh, what's it called? I'm not going to get it right
okay.
now.
It'll come up later.
Yeah. But they made this bridge, and basically you can't make a bridge with tension at the same like hertz value as a human step, right? Otherwise, like the bridge will collapse. Right. So like there's a frequency of humans walking, and so you can't make like a bridge at the same frequency.
Yeah.
Right.
Wait,
but
what does that mean?
Like, okay, so like the vibrations of the tension rods, like on the side of the bridge, right? They vibrate at a certain hertz, right? So it's like two or four hertz. I can't remember that. Like a human step is. So they can't be the same, right? Otherwise, it'll be too much
like in sync, and it'll start moving,
and it will start moving, and it could break the bridge, right? Wow. But they made this bridge at half, so they made it at 2 of a human walk, but it caused like different problems, whatever. So you had all these people on this bridge. It was like at 166 people, this bridge would just start swaying. Start swaying with people at 166 people walking across it. And so what they started to notice is they saw this bridge shaking, and then everybody was walking in sync with each other, like on this bridge, right? And they thought like, oh, the people walking in sync is making the bridge move. But what they realized is that the bridge moving was actually changing because the people were trying to steady themselves. So everyone got synced up with the bridge's momentum and its movement, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it, and like you talk about like that rhythm of life, like, right? And then what happened is because they got in rhythm with the moving like bridge, it got worse. So the sway would get really worse. They had to close down the bridge. They had to like spend millions of dollars to fix this bridge, to change like the tension and the rods and everything like that. Because when they got in tension, like with that bridge, like with another person, I was thinking, or with a situation, right? You start to walk in step, and because you're trying to, you're trying to like balance yourself in your situation or with the people you're around, and you end up making it, making the sway if you don't have an internal, right, like ability to stay at the same pace, even though, you know, like things are going at a different pace. You know, I thought that was so interesting.
That's a brilliant picture of even if you apply it to like culturally, you know, like the bridge is culture, you know, and it doesn't have to be just like one other person. It can, and then there's the culture of heaven, right? There's the kingdom, and that's going to be steady. You know, you want to be on that bridge, not this one that's going to. But yeah, that's super helpful imagery, I think. And it is, I think, a lot of people's lived experience right now. And so that is more than your heart or your mind or your body. That is the enemy of healing and wholeness is that bridge sway that comes from culture. And even if you have people in your life who you find yourself getting into a different rhythm with, it really isn't their fault. There's a larger cultural issue, right? Of like Western culture is all about hustle and you know, we'll sleep when we're dead and all that kind of stuff, and a pace that is totally unsustainable unless you are a machine, and we are not machines, right? I love this author Wendell Berry, and he said the day is coming when everyone will have to decide whether they want to be a machine or a creature. And I love that language because we tend to think of creature and we think like, you know, creature from the Black Lagoon, right? And so we have a negative connotation. And I love that you have to push into that discomfort with the word creature and realize like, I am a creature because I am created, right? That even that in and of itself has a humbling factor, right? Go, I'm a created being that has a rhythm built into me. And that has a frequency built into me, right? And I need the creator to order those things for me. Otherwise, I'm going to get out of step. Otherwise, I'm going to become a machine that runs, you know, nonstop. And then I lose all the beautiful things that make me formed into the image of God.
Right.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah.
Sorry, I realize I'm kind of all over the place.
No, this is so good.
That's great.
This is so good. Well, I hope that you enjoyed part 1 of our 2-part series on living whole with Tracy Brown. I hope it was inspiring. She's absolutely incredible. Just wanted to remind you guys to subscribe on Spotify, on iTunes, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, the works, and we will be back very soon with part 2 of our episode with Tracy Brown. Love you guys.